vaccine. But next, I want to talk about really one of the top scientists in this country. I don't know if you know who she is, but I know you know where the story derives from. I think you remember there was a moment where science looked like it was going to do something spectacular, take a shift into a place, journey to a place we had never seen before. It was exciting, it was a ride, and it went and took a mysterious and interesting and somewhat devastating turn. Do you remember this in the news?
Stem cell research is about to take a giant step forward with the world's first human study using embryonic stem cells.
A cell that can grow into just about anything.
They're essentially unprogrammed or blank cells. Take a stem cell, manipulate it in the lab, and it can become a heart cell, a liver cell, a bone marrow cell. One source is aborted embryos. Another source, embryos infertile couples have set aside in a bank but don't end up using to start a pregnancy.
On the controversial edge tonight, stem cell research. It's a procedure polarizing America and the White House.
We don't believe that the average American wants to see tiny embryonic boys and girls, little children, used as experimental material.
It may be early to say that they are or aren't human life.
On the other side are stem cell researchers and celebrity patients who have lobbied Congress for federal funding.
I'm one of a million involuntary experts on Parkinson's disease.
Should federal tax dollars be used to destroy human life? My answer has to be no.
These boys and girls are not spare parts. It crosses a moral boundary that our decent society needs to respect, so I vetoed it.
So there it was. Yay, stem cells. Oh, aborted fetuses. We all watched this thing happen right before our eyes. It seemed like there was a miracle cure. And then we discovered that it came from aborted fetuses. And all of a sudden, this moral dilemma came up and we had all of these issues. And then finally, George Bush pissing off the entire scientific movement saying, I am not going to use babies and embryos as machinery or to make drugs or any kind of medicine. This is not moral and it's not allowed. And there was this real, I feel like, dark cloud came over science and came over this nation as we thought, did we just pass up great science? We just pass up an ability to heal ourselves, maybe even without drugs? But what I didn't know was there's an entire different story that was happening at the exact same time. And just like every other scientific story we now look at, there was another idea. This was not the death of stem cells. It was death of a story from the pharmaceutical industry and our government agencies that wanted to use aborted fetal stem cells. But did you know that somebody else had an even better idea at the exact same time? Take a look. This is Dr. Teresa Deisher.
Hello, I'm Dr. Teresa Deisher with Sound Choice Pharmaceutical Institute, a nonprofit research organization whose mission is to conduct scientific research that will lead to the replacement of drugs and medicines that are discovered through the exploitation of another human being. Embryonic stem cells are so primitive, they grow out of control and they form tumors 100% of the time. I was the first person to identify and actually patent stem cells that I isolated from adults. It doesn't form tumors. So the controversy surrounding my discovery was that it was not necessary to destroy an embryo and able to do the type of work that people wanted to do. There were many scientists absolutely outraged over my discovery. There was a battle because the embryonic stem cell proponents had won the public and the government, and they actively blocked the advancement of adult stem cells. There is no reason that human beings have to be exploited in biomedical research, and we are leading the way to alternatives. The opinion of the experts in the field was that stem cells did not exist in the adult body outside of the blood system. And that was why people wanted to work with embryonic stem cells or fetal stem cells. And I had done some work with adult blood-forming stem cells And in an experiment where I was working with adult mouse hearts, we stumbled upon it, an interesting stem cell in the culture that was not a blood stem cell. And so I followed it. I knew what a stem cell looked like and how it acted. And it was just incredibly primitive. And it could become almost any kind of cell in the body. And we called it, one of my colleagues called it the ultimate stem cell. People who have since rediscovered it, it's been repeated, call it a V cell.
A V cell.
A very small embryonic-like cell. I called it a pluripotent mesoderm-derived cell.
I won't even attempt to restate that myself. So when you made this discovery, did the medical community just say, oh, thank God, Dr. Teresa Deisher has an answer. We can get out of this moral issue with aborted fetuses and move into this cell, which does everything that we're dreaming a stem cell could do. Were you celebrated for that?
Well, I, at the time, was lucky to be collaborating with some of the biggest names in the cardiovascular field in the world. And I brought in some of my collaborators to see this cell. I remember Mike Schneider, who's now the dean of the cardiology department, I think in Royal College in London. Maybe I'm wrong, I'll have to look that up. But he was at Baylor then, and really a top name in cardiac disease, and came in and he looked at the cells and I described them and he said, oh my God, I could kick myself. I've been throwing those away for decades. I thought it was debris. They don't realize how small stem cells are. And then his group went back and they used a similar methodology and pulled out stem cells. They called them side population cells. And other cardiac people who I brought in, I mean, were overwhelmed. They couldn't believe the types of cells that they had differentiated into. And I think it kind of helped trigger independent research and discoveries in that field, because when you go out to repeat it, you don't always do exactly the same thing. And so they would identify a slightly different stem cell, but still an adult stem cell, which really built the field. But for people who wanted to do embryonic stem cell research, I was for a very irrational reason, a very hated figure. And that's because when pluripotent cells exist in the adult, there's no need to exploit other human beings to do that research or to develop cures for patients. And some of those programs were actually shut down because of my discovery. And they were very angry about that. I didn't try to shut them down. The other scientists in the company did, because there's no reason to compromise your morals anymore. And I would just say I was shocked by the irrational behavior, the hostility, and the attacks, and not very scientific.
When I heard about that, I was, I always question like the motives of why was all the media about, aborted fetuses and stem cells, and I don't remember really hearing a lot about these adult stem cells, at least not till more recent. Now on the doctors, we're extracting blood and doing vampire facials, where they're injecting, your own stem cells back in your face, which I hope you're getting kickback on every vampire facial the Kardashians are doing.
Get a penny from it. But that's why there was so much resistance to the adult stem cells. Embryonic stem cells were patented. And in academics, when you have a patent, if it becomes commercialized and any payments along the way, the scientist gets a percent, 2%, 4%, up to 8%.
Right.
It's a lot of money in their pockets. And so scientifically, they're gonna promote that. Whereas working in a company, we don't get anything from our patents. Actually, I got $1 for every patent. My